Good evening. My name is Timothy Clancy. I'm the captain for Team Semper Relaxo as part of the 2023 Mark Paich Hackathon. The challenge is we're taking the one on for generative AI tools and the effect on society. My team members are, what we're taking as a specific look is we want to evaluate the hype harm control dynamics of disruptive technologies and include the runaway breakout risks when those disruptive technologies include self-generating capabilities such as AI. So I want to go through and start out creating a reference mode and a causal loop diagram at the same time. This is a bit of a novel how we're going to do our dynamic hypothesis to show these reference modes. But we start out with AI capabilities and people using AI. And as we develop this, we're going to show the hoped, realistic, and feared scenarios of the standard method. So we begin with AI capabilities and people using AI. And this generates hype. We are very much focusing on hype. We are not modeling diffusion. And I'll get into that in a little bit later. But hype is the mechanism by which users are attracted to participate in it, stable diffusion. But it's also the mechanism is which new producers, new AI developers, new tool sets, new codes, new individuals doing breakouts get drawn in. So hype is a compounding factor between both producers and consumers of the AI. You see the reinforcing loops. Assuming the alignment to society's goal is at 1 in the hoped scenario, all we get is AI benefit. And as we get AI benefit, we have more people wanting to use AI, more capabilities being directed, and we have this beneficial hope scenario with a nun driving on a motorcycle saving the AI day. It's a happy day. It's a happy, hopeful day. Not very realistic, because there's also harm to society. When we add in the fact that AI alignment isn't going to be perfect, this harm is broad. It could be disruption of jobs, industries, the concerns that artists have of their work being stolen, the ethical concerns, actors with their images and likenesses being taken, disruptive changes in coding. This could also be harm to society in terms of misinformation, propagation. This is a very broad term, but there's always going to be some trade-off between harm and benefit to society. And when you have that harm, the severity of that harm and the strength of it is going to prompt resources designed to controlling that harm. This is government regulation. This may be industry practices. This is a pushback that links back to the AI capabilities and creates a balance that as harm increases, this effort to sort of put in mitigating factors on the AI capabilities of the industry emerges. And this generates our second reference mode, which is the realistic. It's more like an arm wrestling contest, right? And this is to this point, this is true of any disruptive technology. You're going to have trade-offs between benefits and harms. You're going to have people who are caught up in the hype cycle generating this, but you're also going to have folks who say, hey, let's look at how we're controlling this and managing this to mitigate those harms. And between these two, it's like an arm wrestling contest. It's sort of a contest, and it's probably going to ebb and flow on either side. This model to this point, this hype harm control cycle is probably common to all disruptive technologies. But what's different about AI is that AI can write its own code. Now, this has only happened a few times, a little bit unconfirmed, but there's a possibility of a self-generating AI code writing that is developing its own mechanisms. And this is now outside this system of control. As it generates its own code, it begins to contain autonomous, unaligned AI capabilities. This gets risky because autonomous means it's doing it itself. It's not under our control. Unaligned means it's did it for whatever reason it is. Now, in this model, we're taking the assumption that unaligned means harmful to society. I want to be very clear. That's an assumption. I don't actually think in the broader scope that might be a fair assumption, but we can model the dynamics to see what happens if that assumption is what we're working on. If we assume that the autonomous, unaligned AI capabilities are harmful, that generates that harm. And now we have a reference of the feared mode, the SkyNet of Terminator. So we can simplify this all down to a much simpler diagram that I want to show you, which looks at the stocks in this system. Now, for those who are not system dynamics, just think of stocks as like the indicators and levels of things in the system, which the varying rates between you can use to tell how the system is performing. Like if I was looking at my financial statement, I might look at my bank account, the value of my assets, how much debt I have. Those are levels. Those are stocks. I could tell how I'm doing financially, and I could explain my situation to varying degrees based on the levels in those stocks. So what you see here are the stocks of our dynamic hypothesis of the hype harm control cycle. And these are the stocks that we then proceeded to model. So I want to show you the model real quick. We're not going to go into it too much because we do have a paper on this that we're sharing in the hackathon. But this is the model. It's a working model. It's exploratory. So for those who don't know, an exploratory model, it has abstracted data, sort of generic parameters, but walking through the sectors, it includes all those things we just saw. So we have the industry contribution to hype, the industry growth, the adoption sector, hype cycle, societal benefits and harm, government regulation of harmful AI, and the unaligned autonomous development. I mentioned hype earlier. I wanted to again highlight that hype sits at the center of many. We are not using a BAS diffusion model where there's some producer who produces something, and then all the compounding feedback effects are on the consumer side, like word of mouth spread and things like that. Hype cycles in our mind are very different in that the compounding feedback effects, that positive exponential growth is being driven not just on the user side, but also on the producer side. And we see this with AI. As the hype cycle grows up, everyone piles into this market. Everyone's an AI expert. People are jailbreaking things. People are going up on or GitHub. There's so many proliferation of uses, and especially with this kind of technology, those new use cases generate its own hype, whether it's for good or bad. Each time there's a new use or a new fancy thing that comes out, it just adds to the hype. So this hype cycle is very important. Now, again, this model is units check, A-OK. It has first order control, so it shouldn't go negative. It is capable of producing interesting behaviors. Let's see, it starts in equilibrium. So if I pull these all up, right, these all start in equilibrium. So we have something we can disturb, and we can disturb it by having an initial industry push, similar to the Stable Diffusion release last year, that generates that initial spark of hype. Again, I'm not going to go through all the things, but you can see that from the equilibrium, if we pull over here, just two of these growth modes, we can see that there are, you can see there's dynamics that's a growth and decline. People using AI, you can see it's got dynamic behavior. It's capable of generating. Now, in the paper and in the presentation for the hackathon, we're going to go through and demonstrate that hoped, realistic, and feared scenario. But this is just a quick walkthrough of the causal loop diagram, dynamic hypothesis, and the simulation itself. So on behalf of myself, thank you very much for your time this evening, and see you all tomorrow. Semper Relaxo.